Today we're going to take a look at the Govee T1, T2, and T3 Lite LED strips for your TV, which have the power to transform your movie watching experience into a truly immersive one. Let's find out more. Now, if we go back about 20 years ago in 2004, Philips introduced the first Ambilight TV, which was one of a kind. It had LED beads behind the TV that would match whatever colors were on screen and project those colors onto the wall behind the TV. That's by giving you a more immersive movie watching experience. And this is exactly what the Govee TV lights give you, the ability to retrofit any TV with exactly that. Now, there are more than one way to achieve that Ambilight experience, and perhaps a more common way is to have LED strips that are connected to an HDMI sync box, and then you would plug in whatever HDMI devices you have into the sync box, which is gonna synchronize the colors on the screen with the LED strips projecting those colors onto the wall. The problem with using a sync box is that it only works with devices that are connected via HDMI. Could be your digital receiver or your PlayStation, but it does not work for any native apps on the TV, obviously, because these don't run through an HDMI cable, or if you're watching a cable television or just aerial TV. And this exactly is the problem those Govee light strips solve by using a camera that is mounted either on top of the TV or below it. And this camera is going to read all the colors on the screen, relay that information into a control unit, and then to the LEDs, which would then project these colors. And therefore it works on any of the native apps you have on your TV, like Netflix or Prime or whatnot, but also if you're watching cable TV or just aerial TV. The way this works is very simple. You get an LED strip with 3M self-adhesive on the back. You just peel that off and install it either clockwise or anti-clockwise on the back of your TV. Then you install the camera on the top of the TV, or in the case of the T1, you can also place it below the TV. And then you plug in both the camera and the LED strips into the control unit and into power, and that's all. There's still a very important step, which is to calibrate the camera. So you need to download the Govee app, and once you add the product, you're able to calibrate the camera. And to do so, the product comes with orange foam square boxes that you place on the corners of your TV, and this will make it easier for you to identify the corners of the TV. And then you are able to draw lines to match the corners of the TV to properly tell the camera where the corners of the TV and the limits of the screen are. Now, before I show you what the product looks like, let me tell you a little bit about the differences between the T1, T2, and T3 Lite. The T1 was the first generation of these products that Govee introduced towards the end of 2001. In 2002, they released the T2, and a couple of months ago, they released the T3 Lite, which is not exactly an upgrade of the T2, but sits somewhere between the T1 and the T2, and we'll get to why in just a bit. The T2 did have a couple of improvements over the T1. The first thing they changed is the camera. The T2 now has dual cameras, which they say improves how fast and accurate the color matching is to whatever content you have on screen. The camera is also now a gravitational camera, so with the T1 you needed to stick the camera on top of the TV with adhesive. With the T2 they made that a gravitational camera, so it has some weight behind it and it just sits there on top of the TV. The only drawback is you can no longer place it below the TV, which you could with the T1, but to be honest, it's a much welcome improvement, and it makes it easier to install on thinner bezel TVs. They also improved the brightness. The T2 has 60 LEDs per meter, whereas the T1 had only 30 LEDs, so the LEDs are twice as bright. Now with the T3 Lite, and the reason I say it's not an upgrade of the T2 per se, but sits somewhere in between the T1 and the T2, is because it goes back to having 30 LEDs per meter, just like the T1. It also loses the dual cameras and again goes back to a single camera, just like the T1, but it still has some improvements. First off, the T1 and the T2 both had RGBIC LED beads, whereas the T3 Lite is RGBIC W being white. So it adds additional LED beads just for the dedicated white color. And what this does gives you far better color accuracy and reproduction and the ability to show pure white, which was not exactly possible with the RGBIC beads of the T1 and the T2. It also means it's a bit brighter than the T1, although it has the same 30 LEDs per meter. The camera, despite going back to being a single lens camera, is also upgraded. It now has fisheye correction, but also it protrudes a little bit further than the T1 and T2, as you can see, which in my opinion, with the fisheye correction, makes it easier for it to capture the full TV screen, especially on larger TVs. It still uses the gravitational system of the T2, so it only sits on top of the the TV, but it's more adapted for thinner TVs and you no longer need to stick it with any adhesive. And it also has an updated chip, which they say makes it even faster than the T1. So now as I continue speaking, I'm gonna run some B-roll footage so you can see those strips in action while I tell you my thoughts about these. Let me start with my thoughts about the whole experience and if it's worth getting any of these models. And in short, yes, it definitely is. It thoroughly elevates the immersiveness of movie watching and makes the experience significantly more interesting. And to be honest, I've been using these ever since the first generation came out, and I cannot imagine watching movies without these on. I sometimes forget to turn the strip on when I'm watching the movie, and just right away I feel something is missing. And truly, when I turn it on, the movie watching experience, the immersiveness, is really much better. So my thoughts on whether you should get either of these strips, and if you're really into movies, then I would say definitely it's going to give you an awesome experience. Now regarding my thoughts on which one is better, the T1, T2 or T3, it's not a straightforward answer. So first thing, the T2, which has 60 LEDs per meter instead of the 30 on the T1 and T3, is that worth the upgrade? It is significantly brighter, as you can see, and obviously it has double the LED count, but does it make that big of a difference? I don't think so. And to be honest, to really enjoy movies, you have to watch them in a dark environment, and the T1 and the T3 are bright enough. I would also say if you've never seen the T2 and how bright it is, you'll never notice there's anything missing or they're lacking in brightness. The only way I could tell it's actually brighter is because I use these back to back, and I could see in comparison it is significantly brighter than the T1 or the T3. But having used the T1 for many years, I never really felt that it lacks in the brightness. So being more bright is nice to have, but for me is not a deal breaker. Now, unfortunately, what the T2 gains in brightness, in my experience, it kind of lost in the accuracy of color production, as you can see on the screen. The color matching is not that great. I don't know if I have a defective unit or not. I did try to do a lot of color calibration and brightness and white balance and whatnot, and I could never get the T2 to more accurately reproduce the colors on screen as the T1 or the T3 Lite did. And as you can see, the blues, for example, look a bit off, and so do other colors. But the dual camera in my tests was a lot more responsive than the T1 and the T3, and it was able to more dynamically shift and change colors and capture different colors, especially in fast moving action scenes, as you can see. Being a pro model, there's also more features or options in the Govee app. For example, you can choose between having a smooth, vivid or solid experience, which changes how fast and dynamic the color switching is. Now, looking at the T3 Lite, I think it is better than the T1 in the color reproduction and mimicking whatever is on screen, and it does feel a little bit faster in capturing colors, especially in fast moving action scenes. The RGBICW, so the addition of the white LED beads, also a bit better color production and more pure whites over the T1. So which one would I pick out of the three? And I think I would put aside the T1 for the moment, unless you find a really good deal. It's still a very capable device, but the T3 in particular, which is close in price to the T1, offers a lot of improvements. The fisheye correction of the camera, but also the gravitational camera is a much better improvement. The RGBICW, so the addition of the white LED beads, gives you better color accuracy reproduction, but also pure whites, and it is a bit faster with the faster chip. Now, between the T2 Pro and the T3 Lite, this is a tough one. Putting aside the color accuracy, which again could be with my own unit, I don't think the T2 Pro justifies being this much more expensive than the T3 Lite. I will put links in the description so you can check the prices at the time you're watching this review. But if the T2 Pro is much more expensive than the 3 Lite, personally I would go with the T3 Lite. However, Govee should be releasing soon the T3 Pro version, which then would be the upgrade of the T2, and that probably will have dual cameras again and 60 LEDs per meter. For the moment, I don't think the T2 Pro is worth the price increase over the T3 Lite. I think the T3 Lite gives you an awesome experience, especially if you don't want to wait for the T3 Pro, which should be released in the coming few months. On that note, if you're interested in seeing my review of the T3 Pro whenever that is released, make sure you subscribe to my channel, as I do plan on reviewing it whenever Govee releases that. That's all for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments section. And again, I'll put links in the description to all 3 products. If you do end up deciding to buy either one, I would appreciate if you'd use those links. They are affiliate links, and I might earn a commission on these purchases, which would help support the channel. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, cheers.